This is one of the toughest videos I have to make because of the player that I'm talking about, because I really enjoy Klay Thompson not only as a player but also as a person. He's one of those cool, chill guys that you can always, kick it with, but he's also one of the most fiercest competitors that you can play against in any given series. And his career is very storied in the sense that he has always been the 1-2 punch alongside Stephen Curry, and how that he's able to fill in the gaps where Stephen Curry kind of lacks. And specifically, when we talk about defense, Stephen Curry is now getting to a point where he is competent. He's not necessarily a great defender, but he is good enough. While you had Klay Thompson, who has been the person to kind of like fill in that gap of being the premier defender to go against their best guards that the team has to offer that they're going against, and also still being able to shoot and provide a lot of value from there as well. And so he's been some of the best two-way defenders in the league for a very long time. And then came the multiple injuries that he had where he simply just did not come back the same. Now, anytime you're dealing with an injury, yes, you're going to have times where it's going to be a little bit sluggish. You're not always going to be the 100% person that you was before. But for Klay Thompson, this is something that has been a bit of a sore spot for him because of the way and the nature of the game that he plays, right? Like I said, he's a two-way player, and so part of him being an effective basketball player is also him playing defense. And defense, for the most part, is less skill but more so effort, right? Of course, there's skill in playing defense, but you can get by with having pretty good effort and being a pretty good defender. And if you're not athletic or has missed a step when it comes to your athleticism, you're gonna have some issues. Because if you're a slow person or slower than what you used to be and you're still trying to do the same things that you've done before, listen, players are getting faster, they're getting stronger, they're getting quicker. You're going to have a problem in terms of staying in front of people. And this is something that Klay Thompson has had a notorious issue with, especially with coming back from those back-to-back gruesome injuries. Now, listen, he still is a great player. He's a really good role player, and he's able to still fit in the Golden State offense and the dynamics of their offense and how their ball movement is pretty much predicated on Stephen Curry, but also off-ball movement as well. And Klay Thompson's game relies on that off-ball movement. But he is missing a step. And the reason why I start with defense, right, before I even get to the shooting on the offense side of things, is because he's prided himself on being a great defender, on being one of the best premier two-way guards in the league. But when you are lacking on defense, something that should be your bread and butter, you're getting back on offense and you're still trying on defense, so you're still a little bit more fatigued, you're still a little bit more tired, and you're still taking the shots that you kind of notoriously always took, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but you're missing them now. It kind of takes you out your whole game, and it's more of a mentality thing rather than a physical thing at the end of the day, because you're mentally not there. You're not confident as much as you once were in your abilities because you have kind of lost a step when it comes to athleticism. Now, Klay Thompson wasn't necessarily the person to jump off the springs and go 40-inch vert into getting a dunk, but he's always been strong. He's always been at least relatively quick, and that has fit his strong suits. But now with him being left in the dust, him not having the best defense awareness, him not having the best on-ball guarding, he's going to struggle on offense because of how he is. Now, on offense, it's something that I've always critiqued Klay Thompson on, and that is your shooting attempts. Not just your shooting attempts and how many shots you take up a game, but the way that you shoot the ball. What are the types of shots that you're taking? And a lot of times, Klay Thompson has always been the person to take tough shots, right? Especially on the perimeter. But when he tries to create off the dribble, he's not necessarily as great as a scorer than he is when he's trying to catch the ball and spot up and shoot. And so when he's trying to create shots off the dribble, he takes very tough shots, especially in the mid-range where he's fading right into the defender, and he's missing, or he might be making some of those shots, but statistically, it's not been a great season for him for taking those shots. He is down in all regards. And this is something that I honestly don't understand, how the Warriors continue to allow Klay Thompson to do the same stuff that he's always done, especially with stats being on your side saying that, hey, Klay, you're not hitting these same shots. We need to kind of fit you in somewhere else. We need to kind of mold you into something a little bit different, because it's always good. Like, the times are good when you're winning and when you're making those shots, but you might be making those shots in despite of the fact that it is very difficult and it's really hard to kind of keep up and maintain, especially with coming off of a gruesome, debilitating set of injuries. And like I said, for defense, athleticism definitely does play a role in offense as well. Because if you're not able to kind of get that quick step past your defender, Klay Thompson is not really the best finisher in the league. And so they understand that, hey, if we can stay physical, stay in front of our guy, he's going to try to check up a fading shot off the baseline, and we're going to live with the result. Most times out of 10, he's going to miss. The more lethal part of his game is when he's coming off screens, or when he's setting screens and he's getting the ball and taking shots from that off-ball movement. And that is something where Klay Thompson strives in. And so for Steve Kerr not to kind of see that and basically mold him into more of a, hey, listen, no more, at least very limited touches from you when it comes to having an on-ball presence and more off-ball action. I'm surprised that Steve Kerr is not going more in that direction. Now, Steve Kerr has already been one of those coaches where we've critiqued him for his usage of newer players or younger players in his team, and quite literally was threatened by Jonathan Kuminga to either leave the team or get more minutes. And we have seen what happens when you give him more minutes, especially with how spaced out the floor is. He's not that great of a shooter, and so he's always going to attack the basket. When you have Steph Curry, when you have Klay, the gravity of that always expands, and so you get more space to go to the basket and finish. And that is his bread and butter. He does not go outside of that. He's not necessarily a person to break you down, do a step back three. That is what Jonathan Kuminga is. And you have seen that he never really steps out of that mold and tries to be something else. While on the other hand, you have Klay Thompson, who is trying to be something else and trying to step out that mold, but he doesn't really have to. Of course, you can break a person down, one or two dribbles quick, get to a shot, pass it off if need be, and that is something that I wish he kind of gravitates more towards his game. But Steve Kerr is not really assessing that as a coach and allowing him to only do that. Now, I know this might be coming across as me trying to put him in the box, but I'm trying to look at statistically what is showing. He's not making a lot of these shots. He's not really shooting a lot of layups. And the shots that he does make more consistently are shots that is either a 1-2 quick dribble pull up, or one of those shots where he's coming off of screens or backdoor cuts or something like that. It almost always starts off their off ball movement when it comes to Klay Thompson. And it's very difficult for me, especially as a fan of Klay Thompson, to see that the mental toll on him has been really rising this season. He's had multiple interviews of people talking about his poor play in the last couple of years, not just this season, but in the last couple of years, and how he has been effectively stripped from finishing games because of how poor he's been playing, and how other players need to step up in that regard, and that they have been stepping up in absence of Klay Thompson not being the best player for the final 4 minutes. And if you're Klay Thompson, and you can see it in a lot of his interviews, that's a very tough thing to mentally deal with. And he has talked about it on Paul George podcast about how difficult it is for him to kind of like stay in it, even though he's going through shooting slumps and whatnot. And you're seeing it still now. It's a very long season, and it can be very draining and taxing. And when you're not winning, everything is compounded, everything is expounded upon. And so you're going to have a lot more pressure on you versus when you're winning and you have a little bit more leeway to kind of mess up and kind of think things through and understand what type of game you're trying to bring to this team. And this has been more so the reality that Klay Thompson's been dealing with ever since he really got back on the court. I mean, those 2 years where he's been hurt and he's been out, he hasn't been on the court, so he hasn't really dealt with the losing season and how it feels to be on the court playing 40 minutes and still losing every single night that Steph Curry and Draymond Green went through. But when he is on the court, these last 4 or 5 years, he's won a couple championships, and he's been a part of these championship runs, an integral part of these championship runs. And so it's very difficult for him to kind of go from that to where he is right now. And so it's very difficult because it's difficult to see a person like that, a person who's very likable, a person who has a lot to him, and how you can mold your game after, because even if you're not a great ball handler, you can still take the fundamentals of the game, which Klay Thompson has mastered in terms of off-ball movement and shooting and cutting, and take that and mold that to your game. And that's why I love Klay Thompson, because it brings a lot more freshness to the game. But when it comes to his career, Klay Thompson doesn't really have much left. I think right now, even though he's showing great signs by saying that he's going to take a reduced role if need be to stay on this team and even, chunk some of his contract out the window and take less, take that pay cut, we're seeing kind of like the last steps of what was once a dynasty, but also was once a great career of a two-way peak player. We see this all the time, and Klay Thompson is nothing new. One thing that I will always say for Klay Thompson is that he always has that competitor attitude, and he won't give up no matter what. And so I'm very excited to see if he will ever try to regain what he once had and be a little bit more consistent down the stretch.